It was not the name of a city lost, not the name of a commander killed, not even the word surrender. It was something colder. Material Schlacht, the Battle of Material. A war decided not by the courage of the man holding the rifle, but by the number of rifles behind him, the number of shells, the number of trucks carrying more shells, the number of factories that could replace every loss before the enemy could even understand what had happened. For generations, German soldiers had tried to escape that kind of war. Their fathers had been buried beneath it on the Western Front. At the Somme, at Verdun, millions of men trapped beneath endless artillery barrages, where bravery became almost meaningless against industrial destruction. So after World War I, Germany built an entirely different philosophy of war. Speed over size, skill over quantity, decision over endurance. The future, they believed, belonged to the commander who could win before the factories had time to awaken. That idea created the Blitzkrieg, and for several years, it looked unstoppable. Poland collapsed in weeks. France, the nation that had resisted Germany for 4 years in the First World War, fell in 6 weeks. Across Europe, German armies moved like a machine. Their generals were not imagining their own greatness. They had earned it. But then they looked across the Atlantic, and they saw something they believed they understood. A nation businessmen, a country obsessed with cars, factories, and comfort. A society that had avoided European conflicts for decades. To the eyes of a Prussian officer, America did not look like a warrior. It looked like a customer. And when Germany entered war with the United States in December 1941, many German planners reached the same conclusion. America was dangerous, but America was slow. Building an army required time. Training soldiers required time. Producing weapons required time. Moving millions of men across an ocean required even more time. The German calculation was simple. By the time America became a serious threat, the war would already be over. The Soviet Union would collapse. Britain would surrender. Germany would control Europe. And the American army would arrive too late. It was not an irrational calculation. It was a logical calculation based on every war Germany had ever studied. The problem was that America was not fighting the war Germany expected. The Germans thought America needed years to become powerful. They never imagined what America could build during those years. The first warning did not arrive from a battlefield. It arrived on paper. Inside intelligence offices in Berlin, analysts studied reports from neutral countries, economic statistics, shipping records, and industrial production numbers. At first, they assumed the figures were wrong. They had to be, because the numbers suggested something impossible. America was not simply building weapons. America was transforming production itself into a weapon. The Atlantic was supposed to be Germany's advantage. The U-boats were supposed to strangle Britain by sinking supply ships faster than they could be replaced. But then came the reports of American shipyards. A man named Henry Kaiser, who had never built a warship before, approached shipbuilding like a factory problem. Instead of slowly constructing ships in traditional methods, American workers built sections separately and assembled them with astonishing speed. Liberty ships began appearing faster than German submarines could destroy them. The very strategy Germany depended on was collapsing. The ocean was no longer a barrier. It had become a highway. Then came the aircraft reports. At Willow Run in Michigan, American factories were producing B-24 bombers on an assembly line. A weapon that German engineers viewed as a complex masterpiece had been turned into something closer to a mass-produced automobile. The reports suggested America was producing heavy bombers at a rate Germany could barely comprehend. Then came the tanks. German engineers admired machines like the Tiger and Panther. They represented craftsmanship, power, technical excellence. The American approach was different. The Sherman tank was not designed to be the perfect machine. It was designed to exist everywhere. Easy to build, easy to repair, easy to replace. Germany created masterpieces. America created systems. And slowly, the German military began facing a terrifying possibility. The enemy did not need better individual weapons. The enemy could simply create more. But there was still one belief protecting German confidence. The belief that quality defeated quantity. Steel alone did not win wars. Men did. And German soldiers believed their men were better. Then came Tunisia. February 1943. Cas Serini Pass. For a brief, it seemed Germany had been right. American troops were inexperienced. Their commanders struggled. Their coordination failed. Against veterans of the Afrika Corps, many American units broke under pressure. The Germans walked through abandoned American equipment. New tanks, new trucks, supplies still packed. To them, it confirmed everything they believed. America had resources, but resources did not create soldiers. The Americans were rich, but they were not dangerous. The German army had defeated powerful enemies before. The Soviet army had numbers. France had tradition. Britain had courage. America had factories, and factories did not fight. But Germany misunderstood what happened next. Because America did something the German military rarely expected from defeated enemies. America, the failure at Cas Serini Pass became a lesson. Commanders were replaced. Training changed. Tactics evolved. The army that entered North Africa was not the same army that would later land in Europe. The Germans believed armies were shaped by tradition. America proved armies could be redesigned. The battlefield became a laboratory. Every failure became information. Every mistake became an improvement. And while German officers studied American weaknesses, they failed to notice the most important transformation. The Americans were learning faster. By the summer of 1944, Germany finally faced the enemy it had underestimated. Normandy. The beaches are remembered because of the courage, the landing craft, the machine guns, the men walking into fire. But the beaches were not the moment German commanders understood the war was lost. They respected courage. They understood courage. The real shock came afterward, when American forces moved inland. When German officers saw how America fought, a German commander understood war through scarcity. Every shell mattered. Every bullet mattered. Every resource had to be carefully controlled. That was professionalism. But then he watched an American unit encounter a German machine gun hidden behind an Normandy hedgerow. A single weapon, a small position, a problem that would normally require soldiers to risk their lives attacking directly. The Americans did something different. They called artillery. Minutes later, dozens of shells destroyed the position. If resistance continued, they called more. Then aircraft, then naval guns. The German officer watched in disbelief. To him, it looked like weakness. An army unwilling to fight directly. An army hiding behind machines. But then he noticed something terrifying. It worked. The Americans were advancing, and they were doing it while taking fewer casualties. They were not fighting individual battles. They were solving problems. Every German position became a mathematical equation, and America had more answers than Germany had questions. The difference was not courage. The German soldier could be extremely brave. The difference was what happened behind him. For Germany, supplies were something to conserve. For America, supplies were something to multiply. The goal was not simply to provide enough. The goal was to make shortage impossible. That philosophy changed everything. German soldiers who captured American supplied depots reported scenes they could barely believe. Mountains of ammunition, rows of fuel, food, vehicles, equipment, enough material that protecting it all seemed unnecessary. To German eyes, it looked wasteful. To American commanders, it was the foundation of victory, because an army that never runs out of supplies never has to stop. It can continue, day after day, week after week, until the enemy breaks. And Germany was about to discover the final difference. Mobility. The German army created the Blitzkrieg. But by 1944, much of the German army still moved the old way. By horse, by foot. The same army that invented mechanized warfare was still dependent on animals to move supplies. America was different. Every division was connected by trucks, fuel, roads, maintenance systems. The humble truck became one of the most important weapons of the war, because speed was not only about tanks, it was about everything behind the tanks. A German division might need days to move. An American division could arrive within hours. The German commanders were playing a brilliant game of chess. But America had changed the game. It was no longer about the best move. It was about who could continue making moves forever. The moment Germany finally understood the difference came in the summer of 1944. Operation Cobra. For weeks, American troops had struggled through Normandy's hedgerows. Every field was a fortress. Every road was a killing zone. The Germans were defending exactly the kind of battlefield they preferred. Small units, strong positions, experienced soldiers. A war of skill. A war where professionalism mattered. Then America stopped fighting the battlefield the Germans expected. Instead of attacking hedge by hedge, they created something completely different. A storm. Before the infantry moved, thousands of artillery shells crashed into German positions. Then came the bombers. Wave after wave of aircraft turned the battlefield into a landscape of fire and smoke. One of Germany's elite formations, the Panzerlehr Division, was caught beneath the attack. These were not inexperienced soldiers. They were among the best Germany had. The kind of troops German doctrine was built around. But against that amount of force, training and experience could only go so far. When survivors emerged from the destruction, some were unable to speak. The psychological impact was almost as devastating as the physical damage. The Germans had built a military culture around the idea that superior soldiers could overcome superior numbers. But now they faced something different. An enemy whose strength was not concentrated in individual heroes. It was built into the entire system. After the breakthrough, General George Patton's Third Army moved across France with shocking speed. 2 German commanders. It seemed impossible. Armies were supposed to stop. They were supposed to rest. They were supposed to run out of fuel. But the Americans kept moving. The reason was hidden behind the front lines. A massive supply operation known as the Reed-Bald Express. Thousands of trucks moving day and night. Fuel, ammunition, food, replacement parts. Everything needed to keep the advance alive. Many of the drivers were African-American soldiers serving in segregated units. They faced discrimination at home while performing one of the most important missions of the war overseas. Without them, the tanks at the front would have stopped. The guns would have gone silent. The offensive would have slowed. But the trucks kept moving because the American army had created something Germany could not match. A system that turned distance into a problem that money and organization could solve. German commanders had spent centuries studying war. They understood terrain. They understood tactics. They understood leadership. But they had never faced an enemy that could simply manufacture solutions. A bridge destroyed? Build another. A tank lost? Replace it. A division exhausted? Rebuild it. The German army recovered through skill. The American army recovered through scale. And eventually, scale became unstoppable. By late 1944, Germany made one final attempt to prove that superior soldiers could still defeat superior resources. The Battle of the Bulge. It was a brilliant gamble. A surprise winter offensive through the Ardennes. Bad weather would prevent a light aircraft from attacking. German armor would break through the American lines. Antwerp would be captured. The Allied armies would be divided. For a few days, it almost worked. The Americans were surprised. Some units collapsed. Thousands of soldiers were captured. The Germans believed history was repeating itself. Perhaps the old formulas still worked. Perhaps the professional army could still defeat the industrial giant. Then the American response came, and it revealed the final difference. The Germans expected the Americans to react like previous enemies, slowly, confused, unable to recover from a sudden blow. But the Americans did not break. At Bastogne, surrounded and freezing, the 101st Airborne Division refused surrender. They had little ammunition, limited supplies. They were surrounded by a stronger enemy, but they held. And behind them, the American machine began turning. General Patton was ordered to redirect his Third Army toward Bastogne. The movement should have taken far longer. Entire operations had to be changed. Supplies had to be reorganized. Thousands of vehicles had to change direction. But the army moved. Truck after truck pushed through winter roads. Men fought exhaustion. Machines fought the weather. And within days, Patton's forces reached the trapped soldiers. The German plan had depended on time. But America had removed time as an advantage. Then the weather cleared, and the Allied air forces returned. German supply columns that had once moved freely were destroyed from above. Fuel disappeared. Vehicles stopped. The last German offensive collapsed. And with it disappeared the final hope that Germany could win through tactical brilliance. Because the difference was now undeniable. A German victory destroyed American equipment, but America replaced it. An American victory destroyed German equipment, and Germany lost it forever. That was the true meaning of the material battle. Not that one side had more weapons, but that one side could absorb losses the other could not. Germany could create exceptional soldiers. America could create an entire war machine. By 1945, the contrast was impossible to ignore. Germany was sending teenagers and elderly men into battle. The Volkssturm, men carrying outdated weapons, a desperate final attempt to defend a collapsing nation. America was still arriving with fresh divisions, new equipment, new vehicles, new supplies. The war was ending, but the American production system was still operating. The machine had not slowed. The final symbol came at the Rhine. March 1945. For Germany, the Rhine was more than a river. It was the final barrier protecting the homeland. The Americans crossed it the same way they had crossed every obstacle. Not through a single act of genius. Not through one heroic moment. Through preparation, engineering, coordination, overwhelming force. The same principles that had carried them from Normandy now carried them into Germany. So when did Germany finally realize America was different? There was no single day, no single battle, no single moment when every commander suddenly understood. It happened slowly. A report here, a battlefield there, a destroyed division, a supply depot, a factory statistic. A German officer looking across a battlefield and realizing something terrifying. His soldiers were not necessarily worse. Their commanders were not necessarily incompetent. Their tactics were not necessarily inferior.